Today we are jumping into transitioning with a new baby. For me, I just went from 2 to 3 kids a few months ago, and these are 5 things that have made that transition so much easier. By way of analogy, I just wanted to start by imagining that you're about to go on a road trip with your children, and your friend comes up to you and asks, "How is it going? How's all the trip prep going?" And you say, "I haven't really prepped." And your friend is like, "Wait, but you have several kids. Like, how's this gonna go?" You're like, it's just gonna be rough. That's just the way it is with kids. I don't see any point in investing time and energy into preparing for the trip. And your friend asks, "So are you planning like snacks or games or songs for your kids to listen to, anything like that?" And you say, "No, I'm just planning on it being rough. Like, that's just the way it is," right? And for most of us, we look at that scenario and we'd say, of course, we'd never do that. If you're like me, when you plan a car trip, you get tons of snacks, you get games, you get music, you get audiobooks, you do all the things to try to make it as easy and simple as possible to go on your road trip. But sometimes when we are planning on having another kid, we just assume, you know what, having a new baby is difficult, and we throw up our hands about it and kind of give up, right? And that's really not how we want to approach it, because while it is true that having another child to the family has moments of challenge and difficulty, and I am in no way trying to communicate that if you do everything perfectly, you will have a seamless transition and there will never be a challenging moment. I have three and under. There are lots of challenging moments, but at the same time, there are things that you can do to prepare and to plan to make the process more enjoyable for everyone. So that is what I'm diving into today. So these are 5 tips that really, really helped me make the transition from 2 to 3 kids. And I would say even made it the best transition so far by the grace of God. So the first one that has really helped is to prepare for challenging situations in advance. And if you're like me, it doesn't take much to think a little bit into the future and to imagine your life with 2 kids, and then to add in your mind the third kid, and to start asking questions like, what is it going to look like when I have this third baby and we're trying to get into the grocery store? What is it going to look like when I have this third baby and we're getting into church or we're going to the doctor's office? How's this going to work? And what I would encourage you to do is take those thoughts and use them productively towards planning. So what I did is I envisioned several situations where I knew it would be a little bit more challenging to have another baby in the mix, especially with the ages of my kids. So one of those situations was parking lots, getting out of the car. When you have lots of little children, that is almost always very difficult. You're trying to keep children from running away. You're trying to make sure you can carry everyone and get everyone safely inside. And for me, one of the things that helped was envisioning the situation and then figuring out and practicing with my kids in advance. And I did this with several other situations. We would practice walking in the grocery store with my kids. We would practice getting into and out of the car. We would practice holding hands. But again, think through what situations will be challenging and then make a plan for those. An example of this is for practicing going in and out of the car. One of the things we did is I knew it would be hard to be holding a baby and then be trying to keep track of kids if they're running away from me. So something we practiced first at home, then in public, was when I said hold hands, everybody just holding hands immediately as soon as possible. Then when we got in public, something we added was practicing. I knew in my mind my 2-year-old is less trustworthy than my 4-year-old. And so what we practiced doing is I would say, "Jack, hold my hand. He's my 2-year-old." And then I would have my older son, Elliot, hold Jack's hand. So we're all holding hands, but I still have a free hand for the baby. And just going through things like that and thinking, what will be challenging? How can I make it easier? How can we practice this in advance to make life simpler is really, really helpful. Another thing we did before my third baby came is we went to the grocery store, and I would have my oldest child set an example for my middle child on how to walk through the grocery store. So I'd have the 4-year-old show Jack, my 2-year-old, how to hold onto the cart. And then we would practice walking around the grocery store, holding onto the cart, because I knew that baby's going to be going in the little car seat carrier thing in the cart where the kid sits. And I knew my 2-year-old will no longer sit there, and he's the one that's more prone to running off. So we just practice scenarios like that first at home and then in public to make things easier. So I would highly recommend, you know your own life best, but sit down for a few minutes, just jot down what situations will be pain points most likely when you have to carry another baby around with your current life situation, and what are some ways you could make it easier. So often as moms, we just assume life will be difficult and we stop problem solving when there are ways to make things simpler. The second thing that has made a huge difference in my life is implementing a quiet time. So a quiet time is 1 to 2 hours of time where your child plays independently by themselves in a safe place. This is something my mom did. This is something my husband's mom did growing up. And I think a lot of people, it's kind of a lost art. And I actually have a whole course on this that I'll link below if you're interested in this. But what I love about it is I know my child is productively engaged. So I know my 4-year-old is listening to audiobooks on a Bluetooth speaker. I know that he's playing Legos, building tiles, doing all kinds of productive things. And I know he's going to stay in his room for about 2 hours every day. And during that time, I can nap. I did that a lot when I had a newborn. I can read. I can work on projects like this, making courses, writing blog posts. I can meet with a friend for coffee. I just did that this week during quiet time. My friend came over during the kids' quiet time and nap time, and the house is quiet. And we just got to chat and drink coffee and have energy bites together, which is delightful. So think through implementing something like that into your daily rhythm so that way you can count on times throughout the day where you can have these little breaks and be the mom that you want to be during that time. It's just a really, really refreshing thing. If you're like me, you may have been taken off guard by just how difficult being a stay-at-home mom is. I remember thinking this job is around the clock, 24/7. I might be up with a crying baby. The next day I'm up with cranky toddlers. How do people do it? And I started thinking about the future and thinking, how do people do parenting when kids drop their nap? I literally do not understand how you can function as a human being without some time to yourself in some way. And for me, quiet rest time for my child has solved this problem. I've implemented it with my 2 kids. It's what my husband's family did. It's what my parents did. And hundreds of families around the world have implemented a quiet rest time. But if you didn't grow up doing one, you might be asking, how do I do this, Hannah? And that is what the Quiet Time Crash Course is for. In this course, I dive into all the juicy details you can't find online in the articles and on the videos. I dive into literally how do you get that child to stay in their room? How do you make it positive so you don't feel like you're banishing them to their room for 2 hours and like you're this mean mommy? Nobody wants to feel like a mean mom. How do you do that? How do you make it this time that is actually restful where they're not coming out of their room 20 times during each quiet rest time where you're actually just policing your children the whole time? How do you make this into something that is peaceful for the whole family? How do you make it so you have an hour and a half where you can work out, work on projects, do work to earn an income for your family, take a nap if you are pregnant or exhausted from being up in the night with a baby? This course dives into all of that and so much more, and it is perfect for the Christian stay-at-home mom who wants to learn how to peacefully implement a quiet rest time in their home. The third tip that I would recommend that has made this transition more seamless than the other ones is just continuing the routine that we had prior to having kids. So one of the things that I think it's easy to fall into as moms, we can kind of go on either spectrum. Some of us tend to fall into overscheduling our life to where there's no flexibility whatsoever. There's no margin if something goes wrong. That does not go well when you have a newborn. But on the other extreme, some of us can fall into this idea that our children should have independent free play all day long. And I think oftentimes what this does for little toddlers is it promotes boredom because there is no structure. And what ends up happening, at least in my household, it's not like they're creatively building these artwork masterpieces as little 2 to 4-year-olds. Oftentimes they're being destructive after an hour or two of independent play while I'm trying to feed the baby or make lunch or whatever. So what I have found is to implement a loose structure. So this means parts of our day, we have routines, parts of our day are free play. And that variety allows the kids to know what to expect, and it makes free time a real treat where they're using it productively. So some of the routines that we've implemented, we have a Bible time. I do 15 minutes of phonics with my preschoolers. We just set a timer. We do 15 minutes. It's not hours and hours of crazy schoolwork, but we have that time. We have an art time where we practice making cards for other people or painting or whatever it is where I'm present. We have our lunchtime routines where I read to them. We have our quiet time. And the wonderful thing about this is probably these routines only take up 3 hours of our day. And I spend 12 to 14 hours a day with our kids on average at home, right? So they have plenty of free time, but what it does is it breaks up our day where there's predictable chunks of time where they're doing something productive and structured. And then when they get those free time, they're less likely to go and tear up a book or, the crazy things kids can get into, especially if you have little boys. In my opinion, you do not just want your whole day to be a wide open book because little toddler boys, if they're not productively engaged by helping, by doing a project, by doing something exciting, eventually it will usually become destructive. And for me, that's usually after about an hour of independent play. It goes from this creative building process to I come into the room and they have a marker and they're coloring the table or something like that, or worse, right? We can all think of stories like that. I remember I came in one day and my two children were laughing, having a wonderful time. I thought they were like playing this wonderful pretend game, and they were tearing up a book page by page systematically and laughing about it, right? And to me, that's like the line. Like, that was too much independent time. And yes, they should know not to do that. And now they do know not to do that. And that has not happened since. But if you just have this open-ended day, that can honestly make your life so much more difficult adding a baby in. Sometimes it's easier to keep up a little bit of structure, even though, yes, it does require you getting out the crafts, or yes, it does require you opening the Bible and reading to the kids or doing a story time during lunch. Sometimes it's easier to do that while wearing a baby than to let everyone wander around picking their nose. So that's my personal opinion. That is what has helped me the most. You could take that or leave that. Every mom is different, but if you feel like your kids are aimless and you're going crazy because they're destroying things, that has really, really helped me to feel like we're all using our time better. And it's more satisfying to me as a parent as well to know my children are productively engaged. My fourth tip for routines that help when adding a new child into the mix are backpacks. I love backpacks. This is like my new thing that we have discovered within the last few months that have made our life a lot easier. For a while, when we had things like doctor's appointments or even at church, where we kind of had man-on-man coverage because we only had two kids, we could swing either bringing in another adult to help with doctor's appointments, supervising, or at church, we could all just kind of manage. Each of us takes one kid and we could be the one feeding them books and snacks and things like that. But since having a third kid, sometimes my hands are taken up with the baby. So it's been really helpful to have our kids responsible for their own backpacks. And this has been a huge win. So oftentimes what this looks like is I will give my kids a backpack, have them pack a snack to take if we're going to a doctor's office or to church or something that will require my children to sit still, be occupied and quiet, and then I'll let them pick up books and include a few special toys in their backpack that they don't get to play with on a daily basis. And then we talk through our expectations on the way to the event, whether it's church, we expect you to sit through the service, whether it's a doctor's appointment, should we be running around like crazy people at the doctor's appointment? No, we shouldn't, because the doctor's trying to help Sadie. So I want you to sit in your chair with your backpack. You're welcome to eat a snack, look through books, whatever you would like. And you give them a little bit of freedom. This is the boundary. The chair is your boundary. You can do whatever you like in your backpack. I don't care if you're eating your snack or playing with your toy. You get to choose when you get to do that. And it's kind of a fun thing for the kids to be able to manage and look forward to. And they have some amount of satisfaction in being in charge of their backpack like a big kid and carrying it in and out of the doctor's office. So that's been a really, really big win for us as well. The fifth tip that I would recommend if you are adding a kid to the family, or honestly, if you just want to make your life simpler and more peaceful, is to do something that I call morning time. I've seen people do this with backpacks as well, or bags where they have like a morning bag. But how we make this work in our family is when our kids get up, they know they're supposed to stay in their beds. That's kind of the boundary we set for them there. So they're all in their beds. And then eventually I go in and I ask them, what toy would you like this morning? And then they're allowed to bring a toy back to their room to play with. For my 2-year-old, he stays in his pack and play. My 4-year-old is allowed to be out and about in the room. And they each get to pick a toy, and they usually play for about 30 minutes. So I know even if I woke up to the baby monitor, kids talking and chattering on the baby monitor, I'm not just immediately being a parent in the sense that I'm supervising kids, making sure they're not getting into things, feeding them breakfast. I know I probably have about half an hour where I can feed the baby, I can do devotions, I can exercise, I can tidy if we had guests over the night before, whatever it is. I know I have about half an hour of time after waking up, even if I was up all night with the baby, to be productive in some way. And I know the kids are productively engaged in their rooms, playing, talking with each other, etc. So these have all been wins for us that have made transitioning from 2 to 3 kids really, really helpful. Again, is it perfect? No. Are there hard moments? Of course. But I do think it is worth, if you are thinking of adding another baby to your family, or maybe you're expecting, just think through some of the things that would make your life a little bit simpler, a little bit easier, so you can enjoy these sweet newborn snuggles, so you can enjoy watching your kids interact with the baby, and not feel frazzled and frantic all the time. So if you enjoyed listening to this episode, I would love it if you shared it with a friend. Like, subscribe, leave a rating or review on Spotify if that's where you're listening, or Apple Podcasts. And thank you guys so much for listening to another episode of Sugar and Spice Mom Life.